And we're off. So welcome everybody. My name is Frank. I'm here with Planet Geo. We are doing a webinar today on working from home. Mainly that came from feedback from folks like yourself, just our conversations with people adjusting to the transition of everything going on. How do we adjust our lives? We at Planet Geo have been a remote company since basically inception. So we are in a really good position. When we all had to work from home for half the company, it was no different than there every day. So we decided it'd be a good idea to share some tools and some of the things that we do as a company working from home and how we kind of collaborate on complex projects. I've got a panel today. We've got some panelists, which I'll introduce in just a moment. But we're basically going to cover a pretty short and concise format. We're going to have a brief overview of all the remote tools we use. That'll be a review of some of the blog posts we put up on our website very recently. You can check those out. There'll be some links to those later. And then we're going to move pretty quickly into a panel on the human element of working from home. And we've got our panelists today that have various different types of experience working from home and leading organizations working from home. So we'll have a lot of insight from them. And then we're going to open everything up to audience Q&A. That'll happen towards the end of the webinar. So save your questions. There's a Q&A box right for you down at the bottom of your screen. There is also a chat. Try and keep the questions to the Q&A box, but if they come in the chat, we'll still see them. And we'll kind of give you a heads up as to when that's coming. So just a little bit about Planet Geo. If you've never hung out with us before, we are an urban forestry consulting firm. We mainly deal with trees in the city. How do we plan that? How do we make it better? How do we make the distribution of benefits from trees more equitable? We do that with a number of different branches in our company. First off, we develop software for managing trees. With working remotely, we actually can work in the digital environment now. So we have an entire software suite dedicated towards managing trees and maintaining them, tracking that. We also do perform tree inventory and assessments. We have a team of people that travel around the country full-time, ISA certified arborists, collecting tree inventory information. And we also do geospatial mapping. That's remote sensing with satellite data and looking at tree canopy assessment. How much of a city's land area is tree canopy versus paved surfaces, other green spaces, etc. And then we also do have an urban forestry consulting arm. How do we plan these assets around a city and make cities more healthy places as a result of a clean environment? So also, this is just a brief overview of our software suite. We'll cover just a little bit of that today, but we're going to move quickly here and get to the content that we all want to see. Just a little bit about our software suite: GIS, map-based, web-based, mobile. You can use it on any device, subscription, and some of our platforms are actually pretty customizable. So today's panel, just go ahead and introduce our panelists real quick. We'll get to a conversation in just a minute here after we talk about some of the tools that we're able to use working from home, and we'll have a really good kind of framework to color in between the lines. So I'm Frank Mastrobuono. I'm a business developer here at Planet Geo, work in various different departments. If you've explored our software, there's a pretty good chance to talk to me. If you haven't, you're curious, definitely reach out to me after the presentation here. Also, if you're curious about any of the topics that we covered, if you have some questions that we don't get to, certainly feel free to reach out to me by email. We'll have that contact information on our website. We have today on our panel Evan Sims, who is my supervisor and the director of sales here at Planet Geo. We also have Lance Davisson, principal consultant at the Keystone Concept, which provides policy and leadership guidance to organizations of many different types, drawing from a network of expertise partners. And then we also have a friend of mine, Raghav Bala, a colleague from Hult International Business School. Got our MBAs together, and Raghav now works at Akamai Technologies, which is a content delivery service. Basically, if you're streaming content like a BBC broadcast over the internet, how do we make sure that that data arrives to its destination intact and without any interruptions? That's a lot of what Akamai does. But Raghav also let me know that he just accepted a new role at Amazon. He'll tell us a little bit more about that later. And so just moving into the basic tools. Again, this is just going to be a really quick overview. We're going to be talking about these tools in our conversation, so just so you understand what they are and what we're talking about when we mention them, you can definitely have a bit more of a bearing if you're brand new to working at home. Pretty fundamental essential to working from home is video conference tools, whether it's Google Hangouts, Zoom, or any of the other options available online. Some are free, some are paid, depending on what you're doing. Basically, when working from home, there is nothing like a face-to-face element. If we're only going to be talking to each other on conversations, we can't really sense inflection like we normally do socially. So video conference becomes a pretty key part to working from home. If you're not familiar with basic team messaging apps, these are things like Slack or Google Chat. Essentially what they are text messages, but you can include documents and links, and some of them integrate with other apps. And these text messages can be between individual people, or they can also be arranged by channel. So if you're working on a particular project in your company, everybody in that company can be in that group message, and all of those conversations are organized in that same place. This helps for coordination remotely, and we'll definitely talk about the best places to use each one of these apps in our panel. Cloud-based office tools, these are things like Google Docs. Microsoft allows collaboration on its online platform, 365. Google Slides, which was used to put this slide deck together, allows many people to collaborate on the same document. We can view these edits and changes in real time. We can make suggestions for changes and approve them as we go. And everybody on the same team can have visibility on one document. We can also track the way that this document's changed over time. So it's a much more advanced version of Microsoft Word. And also, gone are the days of your computer dying and you forgot to push the save button, because on the cloud, which means it's being updated in real time. Customer relationship management tools are some other things that we might talk about. This is like a HubSpot or a SharpSpring, anything that helps you organize your relationship with your customers, track those conversations, especially with multiple people that might interact with that one person over time. How do we allow everybody to see a history of our interactions? So if somebody calls up on a support call, for example, they may get a different person, but they don't necessarily have to talk to the same person because we have visibility all in the same information. That's what these do, and we may reference these, but a lot of them integrate with your email, so we can share email conversations and things like that. So lots going on there. We can definitely answer some questions about those if anybody has any. And then also basic tools, email and cell phone. We use them every day. We can still use them. They still make great tools for us here. We just might need to adjust the context in which we use them. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But just one more quick point. We do also have industry-specific software that can apply to any industry. If you're listening and you're not in the tree care industry right now, there are plenty of options out there for you. It's just a matter of knowing your needs and exploring them. Definitely take your time to do your research. Some of these tools might be able to help you in this remote environment, and we'll show you just really quickly 2 examples. For example, in our software, this is Tree Plotter Jobs right here. I, as a tree care company, can produce a map-based estimate for my customers, where we can produce both maps and invoices, have photos uploaded of conditions that might need to be addressed, and then we can even send that customer an invoice via email that they will approve digitally. So we can indeed go no contact with this software. And then also right here, this is our tree plotter inventory, definitely geared for the more tree inventory type discipline. But if we wanted to select a certain group of trees that have work recommended to them and share that with someone, we can actually do that really easily just by creating this unique link, like I'm sharing this with you. Oh, I'd have to sign in. Well, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to create a link that I can then copy and paste and send to someone, and they are going to have access to the exact same information that I see on screen. There we go. And there it goes. Anyway, well, I tried. It'll happen next time. So moving forward, we're going to step into our panel now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces in video conference and have a good chat here. But if anybody has any questions as we go through this panel, definitely feel free to put those into the chat. And we will address those at the end. But so anyway, we've got Evan here, who is the Director of Sales here at Planet Geo. Thanks for joining us, Evan. And we also have Lance over here from the Keystone Concept. And also Raghav here, who is Akamai transitioning to Amazon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. So, okay, we've had the technology before, and society has suddenly been thrust into working from home. Companies may not have really adapted that change yet. So for some of us here that are first-timers to working from home, what one piece of advice would you give to someone brand new working from home? And Raghav, why don't you go ahead and start off?
Sure. Thanks, Frank. So I think for somebody who's first time working remotely from home, I would say the most essential piece is you develop a routine that is not very different from when you were going to work. It is quintessential that you don't get lost, and then we live in strange times these days where the days are all seem the same. So I think it's really important that everybody develops a routine that they were forced to when they were going into work. Technology is secondary. Technology is something that will help you in your day-to-day life, but having a routine, making sure that you're up at a certain time, for example, or you're at your desk sitting down at a certain time, you're working an X number of hours, and sticking to that routine is definitely going to help you stay sane. And also, keep simple things in mind, like distinguish between what a weekday is and versus what a weekend is. Have that. I think that's important to maintain, just to stay sane and not get lost in the day-to-day in day-to-day stuff, especially that's work-related. There are no fixed hours these days with everybody working from home. So this is what I feel like is really important. And I think it's just important to have those goals for every day that you want to achieve, small successes that you can take away and walk away with to make sure that, your day was productive, and versus now you have your downtime right now to whatever you do for the rest of the day. So I think those are some quintessential things to my end that I would say.
Awesome. Evan, anything to add from that, given your experience here at Planet Geo?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me okay?
Totally.
So I think the one important thing to remember, I saw a good, quote the other day is, for the expectation of everyone that, we're not working from home. We're at home because of a crisis, trying to accomplish some kind of work. So if you kind of put yourself in that mind frame, in that context, give yourself a little bit of, forgiveness that you're really trying to figure this out, and you're not going to have this figured out in a day. Our setup has been an evolution of years in the making of implementing strategies and putting tools and channels in place for our teams to work effectively. That took a lot of time to get where we are now, and that was an evolution. So I think it's important to really, there's not going to be this silver bullet. There's not going to be, you're going to wake up just one day and get it. It's going to be a process. And so that's important to remember. So give yourself, some leeway and forgiveness, and that, it's going to be a process to work through, and there are resources to help with that.
Cool. And Lance, you do a lot of work with leadership. So what advice can you give someone who's charged with transitioning maybe an entire organization to functioning remotely right now?
Sure, definitely. Maybe to dovetail a bit off of what both Evan and Raghav talked about, I would add be flexible. I think it's a good point to be structured, make sure that you have your time in your office, but accept that like your kid might run in. A lot of us have our kids at home. What I appreciate about this environment is we're all in it together. And so the whole like kid rushing in or it's not perfect or whatever, we're flexible with that. And so I would encourage you to not, I love Evan's point of this is not a strict structured thing. We're figuring out as we go. So let's have fun with it. Like if you look behind me, I work from home all the time, but I don't often do large webinars where I got to worry about what's behind me. Well, my wife's a physician working like crazy right now. I have a 15-year-old and a 3-year-old. The toys are in the back. And before this, I actually just threw up some posters that we've used for the work I do at the Treasure Valley Canopy Network, and just kind of, throw it together, have fun with it, be flexible. I think for working in a team right now, what's really important is that you have this face-to-face time. I love that we have the technology. One thing when I started working from home about 10 years ago after working in government for 11 years was I realized what a social being I am. And man, I can crank out a lot of work when I'm not interrupted in my home office, but I need this social connection. And now we can do it in a remote environment. We can have the social distancing that they recommend to stop this virus. But it can be a true connection. Have some informal social hours with friends. Just make it fun and really connect with people. Ask how they're doing. Be there for them. We want to be there for our team members. We want to be there for our industry and community. And I'm seeing some wonderful things come out of this shared stress that we're all under. And I think we need to look that way. How can we evolve what we do and help each other? It's great to see your faces. I wish we could see the 30 other faces that are involved in this conversation, because it really is, it's an opportunity to come together and help. And I've talked to my cohorts all around the world that I'm working with that are everywhere from leading a small 5-person company to leading a large international organization. And we're all trying to adapt and evolve to be there for our people in this time and be flexible that, crazy things are going to happen. Evan's kids might run in right now because they're at home. And that's okay, right? We laugh about it, have fun. You're going to have a window into his life. So that's what I would say.
Lance, it's crazy. It's almost like you were looking at my notes. There's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to touch on everything that you just touched on. So those that are with us today, we got 40 minutes. Don't worry, we're going to cover all of it. So before we really get into that nitty gritty here, I think it's important to kind of help folks give a breakdown of the tools. But so we have some shared context, I'm wondering if just each of you could maybe take 30 seconds describing how you could be considered an expert in remote work, how this is something that is part of your daily life beforehand and something that you're used to managing, so and people understand kind of where we're all speaking from. So Raghav, you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked for the past 3 years in mergers and acquisitions in a technology company. So one of the benefits that I had was, remote working was not new to me. I had sort of the privilege, as I understand that, of working remotely in a lot of situations because acquisitions are a global, happen in a global space, can happen anywhere around the world. And so, but in order for, when you're acquiring a company, you're dealing with a lot of anxiety from incoming teams. Right, and a lot of that involves the human element of getting to know people, and something that and that person may or may not be, with you in the same office or maybe in a completely different location. So we used a lot of, from a tool standpoint, we used a lot of WebEx. Cisco has this great tool called WebEx. We used a lot of those systems. But more so apart from an experience of working remotely, I would say that it is phenomenal that we live in a world that's so digitally connected today. We have social media to share every day of our lives. We have these amazing video conferencing tools that we can see into each other's lives, experience. But it's the one thing that you actually physically go into a workspace environment to land, and Evan's point earlier was to build the sense of community, that you are part of something bigger, that you're part of something larger, and you're working towards a unified goal. So it is important to sort of keep that community and work with tools that enable to have that sense of community and have that sense of togetherness still available, right? And constantly when you're working remotely is what you're trying to do, especially with teams. So I have one team member who is in Costa Rica who reports to me, but I work every day with people on the West Coast, in India, in Europe, right, at different time zones. So there are a few things that you need, that one person needs to be sensitive for. If you are a leader, if you are an individual contributor, if you are a coworker of within a team, you need to be sensitive and empathetic, especially during these times, to other people. You need to be able to give slot a certain time, make sure you're adhering to, and you make sure you're really listening to the other person. I think that's one of the key to, before we get into like technical tools of remote workspaces and working remotely from home or anywhere else. I think it's critical to understand, and build that relationship with the other person, and not just related to work, but like outside of work. And that's how you establish a sense of community, at least in my opinion. And then you go take it from there. Utilizing your tools, which you've already gotten into, Frank, in your presentation, like Slack and other channels. Those are enablers, right? But more importantly, I think the first piece is have that human element, have that empathy, establish a sense of, establish a bond with your coworkers, your managers, your directors, whoever it is, and your leadership. And then, if you're a leader of leaders, make sure that you are being sensitive to people's time, sensitive to people's arrangements at home, and give them space. More than asking time and space, give them space. And I think people will respond in kind, over a period of time at least. That's sort of what my experience and advice from a working from home situation is.
Cool. Thanks, Raghav. And so, Lance, you seem to work remotely with a lot of different partners, and was wondering if you could just give a quick background on your experience working remotely, and then just maybe give some of the tools that you use in managing these relationships.
Sure, definitely. And this is a great panel. I'm already learning a lot from each of you. So we do most of our work remotely with teams, like we're doing work in Colorado right now with collaborating with other companies as well. I'm a single owner company, and we're built all around building teams to serve certain projects. So one thing I noticed, it can be a challenge working with new team members, is getting to know them, to Raghav's point of we might not meet each other the whole time we're doing this project. And so how do you make that extra time to find out, like, what's their comfort zone? What do they like doing? What do they not like doing? Are they okay with you just picking up the phone and calling and talking to them, or would they rather have time carved out for it? So I think the point of be flexible and sensitive to their work styles. And I noticed in one of the chats the talk about technology. Some people don't have the technology to do what we're doing right now. And so I think it's important to not be afraid to just pick up the phone and make a call, especially in times like this, of just say, hey, how you doing? Explain to me, be really open and transparent about what your goals are leading that team, and really dig deep and find out what it is that makes that person tick, and how can you empower them to succeed versus micromanage them to do what you want them to do. I've heard some nightmares in this current situation of supervisors that aren't comfortable doing that, and it makes it really tough. So just be strong in your leadership style, and be creative and curious about how you can motivate your other team members. That'd be some of the things that I think of. I really am not what I'd consider tech savvy, so I'm always learning from friends and colleagues around. We've used Zoom for a long time. I found that to be a great platform. Social media is a great way to connect. One thing I would advise people in using social media that I've learned is we manage that for a lot of different projects we do. And it's a way to connect. It's not just a way to spit out your message. For so long, and I was even talking to somebody the other day, it was like, yeah, we haven't done that yet with our platform yet because we need to have the money to hire somebody to do it. And I said, well, think about having your most passionate person on your team that's really passionate about connecting and learning, maybe give it a shot, because they're going to interact. I've developed relationships through social media that built business and built a friendship, and otherwise we never would have met. So it's not just an outward feeding tool, it's a connection tool where you can build a relationship. And I still see so many companies that we're spitting information to you, but when you try to connect with them, they don't connect. And I think that's a lost opportunity.
Right.
So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but those are some of the tools that I can think of that we've learned along the way how to use effectively.
Cool. Well, thanks for your insight there. I think, Evan, we use a number of different software tools and technologies to communicate messages among team members, to collaborate on projects. How do we know what is going to be the best medium for us to deliver that message? How do I know, should I send an email? Should I pick up the phone and call? Should I do a chat message in Slack or in Google Chats? How do we do that? How do we coordinate?
I think there's a really good communication technique for that. It's called ask. Ultimately, you talked a little bit about why, what's our history. I started managing teams about 10 years ago in the tree care tree care service, where we had regular meet up in the morning, obviously in the afternoon, but during the majority of the workday, during the day, teams are all over the city, not in the same physical location. And so communication, once you kind of break out of that face-to-face, communication is key with anything. And I think that's really what, the main theme of what we're all driving at is how to best communicate. And what does that mean? And so when you look at a communication, challenge, there's all kinds of factors that go into it, from the tree care operation to the technology available, to the geographical limitation, the time zone limitation Raghav mentioned, and everybody has their personal preference. So, really it's a collaboration effort and asking your team members, asking your clients, your stakeholders, hey, what's the best way? How do you prefer to communicate? Is it okay if I call you? Is it okay if I text you? Do you like this? Are you comfortable with using a chat app like this or a shared document? And if you're not, can I help you? Again, it's just a communication that's been, a theme for thousands and thousands of years since humans have evolved, is how do we communicate? And we've managed to do it over the evolution of non-existence of technology and technology. And so really it's about understanding that bottleneck in communication, what's not working, unpack that just like any other problem, ask good questions, collaborate towards a shared solution and what everybody's comfortable with, and get that buy-in from the entire team or the entire group of like, this is how we like to do things. And again, it's an evolution. It's not overnight. That doesn't happen overnight. But just to Lance's point, transparent, open communication, being vulnerable. It's sometimes tough to raise your hand and be like, I just don't understand this chat app. I can't open it. I don't know what you're sending me. So, and that goes back to a little bit of our point and what we're talking about, a little bit too, is that professionalism. It's okay. There's more of us that don't understand the technology than than those of us that have everything dialed. So I think just understanding that too, that we have our own personal limitations and let's collaborate on the best solution.
Cool. Absolutely. Thanks. So I think with some of these internal chat apps, some of what they build themselves are as, your replacement to email with internal communication. Raghav, you worked in a large organization. I'm sure you use a similar application.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk about the difference between when we want to put a message into a group chat versus, sending an email? Do we want a situation where we're going to get 20 or 30 reply alls? How do we avoid that and organize those conversations using these apps?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. Thanks. I want to say that we we started with, I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to go back to the time when my dad was working, and then fax machines were a huge thing back then, like, telefax and back when I was growing up in India, my dad ran an agency back then, which was international. I just thought I'd share this, which is like he would wait in the middle of the night and we would call on what we would call trunk calls, right, where an operator would look for somebody in the United States or the United Kingdom, and he would place a request in the afternoon and probably expect a call in the middle of the night, when the operator would connect them, because that was the queue. We've evolved in a really long way, and the reason I'm telling the story is we've moved from there to the email culture, right? We moved from there from the written word to the email culture, to the extent we use so much of emails right now that we are in a place where email has become too much, right? There are too many emails, that's gave life to all these chats, these apps that could enable chats. You have WhatsApp, you have, iMessages for people on iPhones, you have, just texting. And now network providers have made a lot of these free, where you use some portion of your internet data or a Wi-Fi connection in a coffee shop to enable this. I almost want to say is the best way of collaboration is, to Evan's point, ask the other person, how would you like to collaborate? What is the best way for me to get in touch with you? And oftentimes, I found that email is not the best way to do that. When you're in a large, I'll give you an example. We did an acquisition very recently, and by we, I mean Akamai did an acquisition of a company, and this is public knowledge. It's called Instart Logic, which was a competitor to Akamai. And one of the key challenges that the teams faced, and there was about a 30-member team that was pulled together for this acquisition. One of the key challenges that we faced was we needed to migrate the acquired company's customers onto our own platform, onto Akamai's platform, and we needed to do that within 3 months. In this scenario, emails didn't work, right? It was these setting up a space, setting up WhatsApp groups was the fastest way of communicating, right? So it boils down to situations, it boils down to the scenarios you're in, and it boils down to, most importantly, the choice of your audience, right? So ask and understand what these are. So we had different tools set up for this. We used WebEx a lot. We leveraged WebEx in terms of a chat mechanism. We created spaces where people interacted day in and day night, and this was a global team set up across the world. So you would leave a message in a chat room for one person who was in a different time zone. They would log in, they would see that, respond back to it. So this is where, techniques such as agile and DevOps and all of that, what we call in the technology world, comes into play, really. These are methodologies that are put in place for quick turnarounds, to fail fast and recover quickly, and turn things around. So boiling my long answer to a short phrase is we've come a long way in terms of collaboration and using several apps. The one thing I would warn a lot of startups is, when you look at an app, look at how intrusive an app is in terms of its security. Just make sure that you're not signing up for something where you're giving away data or your customers' data away. Keep that secure. And an easy example is, you see a lot of forwards on WhatsApp. Once you start using it, try to filter those out in some way or the other. Set up guidelines for these chat rooms that you have. And that's the best way to, in my opinion, that's the easiest way these days, because you're in such you're in a connected, communicable world, that you leverage, if you can leverage that, and use video as much as possible, right? A face-to-face interaction, there's a huge difference between the way I say things and what I say versus how I express myself when I'm talking to you, right? So I would say use video. Your basic phones have a camera, use it to whatever extent. All these apps are free to download. Definitely leverage it as much as possible. I think you get the most out of productivity.
Absolutely. Cool. That was a lot there. Thank you. And it's interesting to note that organization as large as Akamai on complex as complex as a merger and acquisition, you're using just a simple WhatsApp group. That kind of goes to show that you don't really need to adapt the craziest group chat technology right away in order to function. There are certain simple elements of technology, like just a simple text message group in WhatsApp, that anybody can do. And if you can write a text message, you can do that. And if you can do a group chat text, you can do that. And if you can do that, you can coordinate on this large project. So that's really cool to know. Cool. Well, I think we should probably start transitioning into the softer side of things. So, once we have a mastery of all these tools, how do we, without being in the same physical space, account for that human element of the workplace and workplace cohesion and motivation? Hey, great job on that presentation last Thursday. That we don't have a forum to just have that conversation in passing. So how do we work around that in the digital environment, working from home, and still kind of maintain that? Lance, you seem like you've got one ready to go on this one. So let's hear it.
Yeah, no, I was actually, when Raghav was talking, I was thinking, I'll throw 3 words out there. Make time. Make time for people. I think when you were talking about the email culture and everything, we get so busy emailing directions out and deadlines and everything. And sometimes you can go through a thread of 4 or 5 back and forth emails when if you just took the time to call an individual, it would actually be less time and more effective for the relationship. So I would say make time, build trust. That's so key in a team, to know that your team leader and everybody on your team is working hard together, and that you trust each other, and empower the people that work with you, that work for you, to do amazing work. Those are 3 things that kind of came to mind listening to you all talk. And it's just so important. We can get too focused on the deadline ahead of us, or the work we've got to do for a client. And if you don't work hard to build relationships in what you do, you're not going to be able to get through battle together. So I'd just throw out those 3 words to maybe be a take home for folks.
Sure. Thanks. Evan, do you want to maybe provide a quick rundown of how we use some of these tools and how we help account for the human element of working on a team?
Yeah, certainly. I think it is that relationship, that personal element. I mean, one thing that I think more culturally that we do is, when you think about meetings in person, you don't walk into the room and start talking about the agenda, right? You maybe shake hands, which is maybe going to change now into a bow. But you shoot the shit for a little bit, right? Like, you ask how the kids are, you talk about the weather, you kind of ease into a meeting, or 5 minutes before the meeting, you talk about, you catch up. And I think one thing that we do that has become kind of natural for us, we don't force it, but we just kind of have allowed it, or, whatever you want to, how I want to say allow it, but make it okay to do that in part of a meeting. And very oftentimes we spend the first 10 minutes in a meeting not talking about the agenda, but just kind of catching up on random things, personal, professional, whatever. We end the meetings. Some people will stick on and just chit chat. 2 people, everybody else will leave, and 2 people will continue to chit chat because they wanted to catch up. And so I think that's really important, is not dive straight into the agenda on these video meetings, because it's scheduled at 11. You show up, you turn your thing on, you're like this, that, this, and then you're like, here's the, okay. But, ease into some of those meetings, have some of that personal connection time throughout. And I think, to a little bit to Raghav's point and Lance's point is, you can't always get, what we do commonly too is you can't always get across in a written message, even in the chat. I love chat. I despise email. Google Chat is just my favorite tool of all time, especially rooms, the concept of the rooms, which maybe I'll talk about a little bit more later. But, you start chatting somebody even, and it's like, this is not coming across right, or I can't, you can't understand the tone of what I'm saying. I'm really not hammering you on this. I'm just trying to understand the problem a little bit better. Can we just spin up a quick video chat? And so having that tool handy, that's one of the best, the things when you're looking at some of the video conferencing tools, is the speed at which you can spin one up. We use Google, we use chat, and right in the chat, there's a button to spin up a Google Meet. So we can spin up a Meet in 2 clicks. I'm chatting here in the same thing, in the space bar. I press this, spin up a face-to-face right away. That's really important because, again, if you have to go through this process of scheduling it or creating a link and then passing the link and you kind of lose that human element of just like, hey, let's just talk about this real quick. Boom, you're face-to-face. And it's just like I walked over to your cubicle and now we're talking, I'm sitting on your desk and we're chit-chatting.
Yeah, it's funny, the way that that process that you described flows out is almost kind of reminiscent of walking by someone's office saying, hey, I noticed XYZ. Do you have a second to chat about that? And then, when I step in and close the door behind me, we're setting that video chat. It's almost like, so you can imagine yourself in the physical space in that same situation. That's kind of like maybe that cue that you might want to use as to like, hey, this is when I want to do this.
Yeah.
Raghav, you have something to add there?
No, I was just going to say, it's not just about, work-related stuff that you would stop by. You would stop by for anything, right? In this scenario, it's more than important now to just take time to set up time that's not related to work with your colleague. You make friends. We all spend, 8, 10, 12 hours at work. We make friends at work, right? It's important to keep that relationship going just by spending, time offline for these catch-ups and to just say, hey, what's up? What's going on? What's new with you?
Absolutely. And I just got a quick tip that just came up in my own life just right now. I had a siren drive by my apartment and, you got to develop that mental cue oh, this is going to disrupt everybody's meeting. Let me know where my mute button is. I'm going to mute it real quickly. And then also remembering when, okay, I put my mute button on and it's time for me to start talking again. It's also something that it takes a little to get used to. I have a headset that sometimes if I start talking while I'm on mute, it'll tell me. That can be really helpful. Those are pretty inexpensive, but I just wanted to point that out because that, real time. But I mean, it's also a pretty good segue. I think looking at our time left and other things going on here, we had a discussion earlier on, Lance, about kids walking into the room. And if no one's ever seen it, there is a pretty famous viral BBC interview where, actually a professor's kids did walk into the room. Just wanted to show that if you haven't seen it here.
And that's the norm now, right? It's not.
Right. That's awesome. Oh,
Classic.
Right.
I've experienced this, and the anxiety level for this guy is shooting through the roof right now. I can tell you.
But that's
Especially
why it's
that he's on
funny,
live
though.
television.
It's because we can all relate to that, right?
right.
So yeah, I mean, Evan, you are working full-time from home already. When safer at home orders were enacted, now school is downstairs. So how has that changed things for you? How are you adapting for someone who might be plunging into remote work for the first time and their kids are also at home and this is happening simultaneously? That's a bit overwhelming. What can you say to them? What can you offer them in terms of advice from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, the kids are always here. They're always here now. Even for me, working remotely now for the better part of 6 years, or working from home for 6 years now, and having an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old, I've had kids and working from home. So that was never, that I've always had that and found ways to overcome that. But there's this added element, even for me, of them now being all the time. And, having to do the part-time teacher thing, to pitch in with some of the schoolwork. That's, I've had to rearrange my schedule to accommodate that. And so, where one of the things that, was really important from working from home initially was setting a schedule, kind of like what Raghav mentioned, setting that schedule, but also the expectation for my family of, hey, I'm lucky enough to have a room with a door and sometimes a lock if needed on webinars. It was important to set the expectations with my wife early on. And as my son got older and could understand a little bit more of the importance, and really from the point of view of like, okay, in the morning, I get to work at a specific time, and I kiss my kids and I kiss my wife and I say, goodbye, I'm going to work now every single morning. Like I'm walking out the door and going my commute is walking up this flight of stairs now. But I try to mimic that as like, okay, everyone, I'm going to work now. And we've had lots of conversations about that expectation of when daddy's upstairs in his office, the door is closed, he's not even here. I'm at work. I am at the office across town. You can't come in and ask me to change a light bulb. I can't prepare a snack. And that was an evolution too, setting that expectation. But again, collaborating with your family members, understanding the limitations, being accommodating to some flexibility, to Lance's point. But, my wife will text me. She may be 20 feet away from me, but she'll text me. And she'll know that if I don't respond right away, I'm probably on a call or doing something important. I'm not going to go talk to her. I will text her back from my office. Again, so really recreating that office experience at home, however you can do that, and setting up that expectation and that understanding with your family members as best as possible, and sticking to that schedule, so they know when you are off. And right now I'm off and on and off and on. But we have that schedule dialed in, and so they know exactly when I'm going to come off and when I'm going to come on.
Awesome. So, we even had a similar type interaction situation where on a webinar, our colleague Beth had her dogs. Her dogs don't like the FedEx. Coincidentally, getting a delivery of supplies.
All right, Beth, looks like the attendees joining have kind of stabilized, so why don't we kick this thing off?
All right, and unfortunately the FedEx man just drove up, which means the dogs will go nuts, and I apologize to everyone. So pardon me while I talk over a rabid Jack Russell Terrier.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great timing. So welcome everybody. Well.
But what happened there, Evan? You were on the call. Can you give us a quick little breakdown?
Yeah, we were just kicking the webinar off, and I was, going first, and just it's when you're starting a webinar, especially when you have a large number of attendees, there's already this kind of like going on stage nerve factor. And so making sure the technology is right and everything, okay, we got everything dialed in. And then, yeah, just that thing that's totally unexpected where I handed it off to Beth, and I know her anxiety is just shooting through the roof because she's about to press unmute and she knows what's going on. The best thing, and I've been really interested in, we've been talking about it a little bit, is this new understanding of professionalism, and what does that mean? Is that unprofessional? I don't think so anymore, right? I think we all understand that is going to happen, and we all, will experience that. And so being empathetic and using humor in that, I think humor is the best way to, overcome. We're all laughing at this, and it becomes funny. It's really nerve-wracking at the time, but telling somebody it's okay, I had that happen, no problem, laugh about it, and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So are we going to get to know everyone's pets and kids now? We have a window into everybody's home. Is that where we're headed? Is that what the new sense of professionalism is? And are we comfortable with that? And how do we get more comfortable with that? Raghav, do you want to go for that one?
Yeah, I think to Evan's point, in the recent meetings that I've been on, I have not been in a single meeting where somebody's kids have not walked in, somebody's pets have not walked in and just taken over. Before this pandemic broke out, our homes at least for people like me, myself, who went into offices, I didn't design my house around having a workspace. Sure, I had the occasional Friday work from home, and I'd imagine that it was the case for a lot of other people like myself. My wife is a real estate developer, so she needs to be on site, and now in Boston, construction stopped. So our house wasn't really designed as a workspace. So we did a lot of makeshift scenarios. Another example is during my last day at Akamai, I was talking to my chief information officer of Akamai, who was kind enough, as a leader, it was kind enough to give me a call and say goodbye. And he was single-handedly in charge for the workspace collaboration of 8,000 people working from home right now. Right, so the pressure on him is immense. So I asked him, how are you dealing with something like this scenario? And he said that, I think something that stuck with me is if you are coming out of this pandemic not learning a new skill, that's okay. Like, this is not why this is not why you're working from home. There are going to be new social norms that are now going to be defined. We are in the middle of a historic moment, right, that we will look back on and say, hey, this happened in 2020. Now this is going to define new social norms in the future. So I think we are in a place where we are definitely going to redefine a lot of cultural, social norms. A lot of things that were previously thought to be unprofessional are now going to be mandatory, right? You're going to be giving people space and time, a 4-day week, just so that that person can go to spend some more time with their kids is okay right now, right? It's going to be required and of a lot of companies. And it's going to be interesting to see how companies, individuals, teams restructure their culture, day-to-day culture around this situation. I think that's important. That's the important point here.
Absolutely. And so, Lance, because you work a lot with leadership, kind of in this realm, a company like Patagonia, they offer on-site childcare. They spend $1 million in tuition every year on on-site childcare. They even advocate for other companies to at least subsidize childcare for their employees. They offer things like you can go and leave your workplace and go have lunch with your child in the middle of the day. If you're a mother to a newborn infant, you can breastfeed on demand. For leaders, is this the way of the future? And Patagonia also commenting that they estimate they recoup at least 91% of their costs from employee retention and engagement. So is this the way of the future for companies? Is this something that we should absolutely be considering as molding into our lives in the future?
I definitely hope so. One thing that Patagonia was also famous for was paying their employees an hour every day, I think it was, to go surfing, to go do the thing that you do. So I want you to test out this piece of equipment so that you know it really well, but I'm going to give up a little bit of your productivity doing your job to go do that. And so I think we've got to be creative and adaptable right now. And if you're not, every leader that I've talked to, giving them a call, say, how's it going? How you doing? And everybody they feel a lot of responsibility for their teams and their large organizations. So you can tell that they're stressed, but also what fascinated me and something that I've learned is take the time to absorb the moment, right? Accept that there are difficult times ahead, that we're in a difficult space, and then move on to what's next. What's the new opportunity here? How can we evolve and adapt? How can we help our people become more connected and compassionate with what we're doing? And so I hope that we see more of that Patagonia type of model from leaders that understand that the more we really care about our people and invest in our people, the more they're going to return to us and invest in that capital of the company because we've invested in them as individuals.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. And I would encourage each and every one of you to, again, take time, observe this moment. It is a historical moment, like Raghav said, but there is so much opportunity here, and we're gonna get through this together, and it's gonna be a positive evolution, even though at times it's gonna be tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, and almost you kind of made a point there. So we're giving up an hour of productivity to go surfing, but are we really giving up productivity in that question? Is it really a zero-sum game here, or are we growing the pie bigger by allowing people to live their lives and be their own people?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Evan, not everybody's Patagonia. We don't all just have $1 million to throw at employees, at home or subsidized childcare. So, what are some of the things a business like Planet Geo, 30 people, what can a company like us do to, in that vein, improve our employees' lives and improve, therefore, productivity, seemingly?
Yeah, I think, it comes down to some basic leadership qualities of just, understanding your team members and really understanding their situation, asking them questions, and see what they're comfortable with, what makes them uncomfortable, and trying to work around that. I like, there's an article I read about Jeff Bezos some time ago, and he talks about he doesn't really subscribe to this work-life balance. It's more of a cycle where if I'm happier at home and with my family, I'm more productive at work. And if I'm more productive at work, I come home and I'm in a better mood and able to interact with my family more positively. So, it feeds each other. And so for me, it's really important that the family is taken care of, your pets, your personal life is taken care of, because if you're more satisfied in your personal life, you'll be more productive at work. And if you're more productive at work, you'll be more satisfied in your personal life. That's what I believe, at least. And so if you approach it from that direction and really understand, and again, there's no silver bullet. There's not one thing. On my team, we have kind of a diverse group, some with kids, some without kids. Frank, you move around. We kid about the vagabond aspect. You've moved, I don't know, since the year and a half, you've probably been in 10 different places. So, I understand that. I understand that you're moving around a lot, but that your work, ultimately your work shows that you are really productive, and I can't always get in touch with you in the middle of the day because you work odd hours. And so I understand that, and I don't expect an answer right away sometimes, or I expect you to chat me when it's not a good time for me. And so again, it's that expectation and understanding your team and just being accommodating and flexible and empathetic to, whatever their situation is.
Absolutely. And so one of our questions from Jason Grabowski, hi Jason, really on this topic, and if anybody else has any other questions, we're probably getting down to the last few minutes of our webinar here, so definitely submit those. We'll try and answer them before we wrap up with our final question here for our panelists. But Evan, Jason was asking, when engaging in team projects and management, he assumes that there's some sort of a sweet spot versus, of giving people space versus not linking back into the team. So how do we kind of convene a team huddle to keep the project ball moving, and being aware of deadlines and creative work is important. How do we kind of incorporate all that? And something that comes to mind for me is how we do a daily stand-up. If maybe you could talk about how that applies here, and any other ideas that you might have to answer Jason's question.
Yeah, the stand-up comes from sort of the agile concept, where we do this, they do this in the office. So we do have, half of our team that works out of the office and only then part-time. But, the concept of a stand-up is just a quick sync up, and they call it a stand-up because you're supposed to be standing up because it's like a 15, 20-minute sync up. It's a daily, there's no true agenda. It's just talking about what's happening, what happened since our last stand-up, and what we think will happen until our next stand-up, and what's the kind of hot topic of the moment or the day that we can all glean some information and share some information and be productive that way. To the point of project management and that sweet spot, I think one thing that really helps us is define that space is we can still collaborate on shared documents, and now we're experimenting a little bit with Google Jamboards, which is a newer application in the Google Suite. So it's this whiteboard concept, and they have actual monitor that people can write on, like a whiteboard if you're in the office, but then you can view that board and put sticky notes and write on it as a digital whiteboard from home. And so we often will meet on a project, talk about kind of the next steps, and then homework in between the next meetings. But we're still collaborating in that shared document. We can see each other adding things or adding comments sometimes. So we're still sort of collaborating in that in-between space, but not on a call all the time. So I think that really helps us with those shared documents and now the Jamboard and things like that.
Sure. So I think probably our last question for the audience before we have just our quick final wrap-up question. Tara's asking, is it okay to take paid time off or annual leave while you're working from home? You know, really, like, how do you deal with the separation of like, okay, I'm working from home and I can take a break whenever I want, but like, I gotta take some time off. So yeah, I mean, like, everyone's laughing, and I think those of us that work from home, we know this, but I mean, me personally, Evan, you mentioned like I like to take breaks. I get more productive. There's all sorts of studies that show that passive activities like walking allow your brain to make connections that it wouldn't otherwise make. That's something I do. I wrote a lot of these questions while walking around my neighborhood into a Google Docs on my phone. And then when I got back to my office, this document was just right there on my computer in front of me as I edited it. So, I mean, I don't know, like, how do we balance between the breaks that we take when we work from home and the ability to have our own autonomy and create our own schedules and to really be results driven with our work versus, hey, you know, I need a day off and I want to take a day off, or like, I'm going to take the afternoon off. I mean, Raghav, do you want to go ahead and chime in on this one real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently in time off. I'm between two jobs, so I'm a classic example between where, you know, I have a few days off right now, but I understand the question where, you know, as part of a regular day job, you want to take time off. An important thing to think about is everybody today are being paid to think. And that often, you know, it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day grunt work, day-to-day thing, in the muddle of things, where you're not taking time off to think, or just taking time off to tune out, right? Go for a walk. You know, people can leave home, but it's important to even take staycations, spend time with the family. That is, whatever works for you in terms of recharging yourself is important, right? And it is especially important to take time off. In this scenario, nothing should change from where people were working, you know, when they were going into offices. Yeah, nothing should change in terms of taking time off. It should be, you know, you have a planned vacation, take time off for a week, stay at home, develop a hobby, right? It's whatever works best for you, whatever is your definition of downtime. I think you should definitely take that and not feel guilty about it.
Lance, any guidance on the kind of leadership aspect of how to allow employees to structure their day? Should you just, you know, not track hours, not worry about anything, be results driven? Is there a healthy balance? What's the best way to go about this from a leadership perspective?
I've always looked at just focusing on deliverables and giving people the freedom as long as you're delivering. And like, some people need to be there 9 to 5 to answer phones or whatever. But that gets to that, take the time to get to know somebody, empower them to do great work, and be flexible as a supervisor or leader of a team. I would hope that, especially right now, that you're taking, if anything, a little extra time to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, to enjoy this. What I was thinking the other day, our kids might look back on this and say, remember that special time when Dad was around so much instead of on the road or whatever. And so I think we should be open and flexible to that. And again, I think if you do that, people will be empowered to do greater work. I have learned I tend to be a giver and contributor. I'll do a lot for you if I believe in you. And I got to the point where I wasn't taking care of myself. And what I learned was, if you stretch yourself out so far and you're not taking care of yourself, you can't serve others. And so make that time, go for that run in the middle of the day, go for that bike ride because it's beautiful and the trails are quiet right now. And around, that's part of why we live in Boise, Idaho. It's almost expected that like if it's a nice day, you're going to be hitting the river and not going to be around. So just if you're an employee and you need that time, let your supervisor or leader of your team know that. And if you're a team leader, be focused on what your people need to be the best people that they can be. And hold them to deliverables, you know, like if you're gone for 4 days and I can't get a hold of you, but there was a deliverable on Tuesday and I don't hear from you till Thursday, that's not good. But if we just focus on that, I think it's pretty simple. And if you deliver, you get the freedom to do what you need to do.
I agree. And in confession, I think one of the hardest things for me sometimes is knowing when to stop and knowing when to take a break. I'm very infamous for, you know, starting work in the morning and going straight through, and then I don't eat lunch and I forget that I haven't eaten lunch, and then I look up and it's 4 p.m. and I'm like, oh my God, I'm starving and I haven't eaten lunch. So I appreciate everybody staying on a few minutes after. Just one final question for everyone, hoping maybe we can all chime off. Looking forward, this is a pretty unprecedented event we're experiencing right now, and events like this tend to shape our worlds for a different future. So what opportunity does this present us to maybe shape our daily lives in a way that allows us to be humans more, in a way for the better? Evan, you want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that, you know, with any kind of relationship, the human element, you're always kind of looking for a common denominator, and what is that point of connection that you can make. And the interesting thing here is that we all have that common denominator. Every single person on the planet has this shared experience, and so we can relate very easily with many other people because we're all sort of more or less experiencing the same thing or this whole thing together. And so I hope that gives us a good, you know, jumping off point for building our relationships with each other, being more, you know, understanding of our fellow humans, and that we are humans, we're not machines, and that work does not come from robots. It comes from humans who are experiencing these things, and now we all have that common understanding. So I think that's going to be a really interesting thing that we can start to, you know, form relationships where it may have been challenging or we didn't have much in common. Now we do have something, all have something in common here.
Absolutely. Raghav, anything to add from your final thoughts?
I think echoing Evan's point, it is just taken a pandemic for a disconnected world to become connected again in lots of ways. An interesting number that Akamai threw out there in a press release was that our traffic, the internet traffic seen on the world, has peaked to 167 terabits per second, and that's your video conferencing, that's your chats, that's your download, gaming downloads, whatever it is, right? That's a lot of information. It is my hope that, you know, for the future, we see people connecting more and more often, and really using this technology for what it was originally meant to be built for. It was originally built to bring people together. It was originally meant to keep people social, not distant, and really use it for good. And that's the one thing that I would really like to see, you know, once we come out of this, when we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we are more connected. We have a window into everybody's life. You know,
exactly.
We're all living at home and we're all isolated, and folks like me can't even get a haircut. So I was thinking about wearing a hat like Evan.
Neither can I.
I decided just to bear it all. But yeah, that's a really good and interesting point. And you know, likewise, I find myself connecting with friends on Saturday nights over video conference that I wouldn't normally otherwise hang out with on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
But because we're all in this situation, we're catching up more regularly, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Lance, any final thoughts from you? How can we use this event to shape our world for the better?
I love the points that you've all made, and I think relationships are extremely important to me. I look forward to the time the four of us can compete together in the same room. I think now is a time that we are going to get through this together, and that's the only way. I think a lot of the division we've seen in our country is starting to whittle away a little bit. I think we're coming together more and trying to find ways to come together and less ways to go apart. And I love that. I think right now, good advice for people is help. I have found a great opportunity to help others. How can I help you? How can I understand? We're helping a lot of small businesses that had to lay off everybody and don't know what to do. They don't know where to go get the financial assistance that luckily our government's trying to get out to us. Just come together, call up your friends, colleagues, and even your clients that you might not be working with. If you have a little extra time, now's a good time to say, how can we help you in this current situation? Because now is where we're going to find those creative solutions. And we shouldn't just, I love working with companies that are saying right now is the time to, again, pause and then advance forward, because it's so critical that we start planning and using this extra time to plan what's next, because when the faucet does turn back on, we've got to be ready. And if we just sit and wait and wallow and watch too much TV and news, then we're not going to be ready, nor will we be mentally healthy and excited to get about it. So I think in a nutshell, find ways to help, find ways to connect, like you've all said, and embrace this opportunity to get to know each other to an even deeper level.
Cool. Well, thanks so much.
This is also...
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I just have one point is like, this is also a great time to evaluate things like business travel, air travel, road travel. We've all been stuck at home. It's a great time for the environment, if you think about it, right? Was business travel ever essential is the question that we're leaving everybody with. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, Frank, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all good. Thanks a lot for that. That certainly adds a lot, and we appreciate everybody. In line with what Lance said, staying on, spending a little extra time here to answer everybody's questions, doing what you can to help. That's all we're trying to do with this webinar. We're here. If anybody has any questions, my information will be on the website. We had a couple blog posts that can serve as a resource to you in working from home, but feel free to reach out. Anyone, whether you're a client of mine or whether you're just someone not even in this industry, feel free to just drop me an email, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have we didn't get to today, or provide you more information on some of the tools we use and how we use them. So, thanks again, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you all soon. Stay well, safe in the meantime, and all my best wishes for health, wealth, and peace.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Frank. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye now.